My Grandmother's Garden. Chapter 1. My Grandmother's Garden. Worthy by Jada Pinkett Smith. This is a good book. I've seen some naysayers, and unfortunately, most of these naysayers were about us. But the last time I checked, she was in the New York Best Time Sellers list. I'm sorry, those are my producers, Fendi Chai and Bruno. They was quiet right until I decided to hit record. But chapter 1 is My Grandmother's Garden. Today is Saturday, November the 18th, 2023. It's currently 16:01 hours. Welcome to my world where all is well. I'm the thinker who thinks the thoughts that create the things. I'm also the proud queen chief of 3 kings. Please like, please share, please subscribe, please. Thank you so much. My Grandmother's Garden. It starts off, she's talking about when she was 13 to 14 years old, and she had a 16-year-old boyfriend that worked at the 7-Eleven, and she used to sneak out of her grandmother's house at night to go see him. Her mother was a registered nurse who worked the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. night shift. When I was a cop, I worked from 1900 hours to 0700 hours, so I know what that's about. She was raised in northwest Baltimore, Pimlico Heights. She lived with her grandmother and her grandfather. The way she was when she grew up, she was tomboy cute. I like that, tomboy cute. I wish I had the opportunity to be tomboy cute when I was growing up. I was a tomboy, but I wasn't cute because I had to wear long dresses and skirts because of the Pentecostal religion I grew up in. She describes one scene because they lived in a Hasidic Jewish community. Her grandfather was a doctor, so they grew up in what you would call an upper middle class community. And she described one scene when a guy pulled up next to her. It was a white guy. He was driving a beat up gray car and pulled up next to her on the curb, and he pulled his passenger window down, leaned over and was like, "Hey, have you seen the lost dog around here?" She was like, "No." And then she noticed that he was jerking himself off, and they had a trench coat around him. But she said no, and she kept on walking, and she walked like she was about to walk towards the church. So he pulled off and stopped following her. And she said that's when she first realized that she has to have eyes in the back of her head. And she also realized that the best way to get away from these perpetrators, or most of them, is to show no fear and act like you're not fazed at all by their tactics. She said don't become an easy prey to coward predators. She made herself safe by hiding her feminine nature and displaying a masculine bravo. But when she was a kid, she said she wasn't scared, but she was disgusted and disrupted, but never scared. And she realized that there's no such thing as a safe neighborhood. And that's one thing that she liked about the hood. The hood, there were no lies, because when you're in the hood, you knew what it was about. It wasn't pretending to be a safe neighborhood, which I didn't even think about until then. But she talked about her mom being a registered nurse at the hospital maternity ward. It made me remember Jada Pinkett Smith had a show on TV. I don't know what happened to it, but I liked it. When I was married to my wife Dimple. She passed away in May of 2016 from pancreatic cancer, but she was a registered nurse. But she had a show on TV where she was a registered nurse. It was a good show. I can't remember the name of it. But when her mom was at work, of course, she was at home with grandma and granddad, and she took upon herself to ignore every law her mom ever thought of. She felt free, unguarded, unwatched, and she was loving the wildness she was able to participate in. But one thing about growing up in the community she grew up in is that her grandmother taught her how to respect differences, and differences didn't have to make us hate each other. And I thought that was good, and she was able to learn that she could find common ground with anybody. And her grandmother called her Angel Pie. I like that. That was her pet name, an affectionate nickname that she gave her. Now, Jada Pinkett Smith was the first born grandchild of her grandparents. Her grandmother was West Indian. She graduated from Howard University. I took both of my kids on tours to Howard University, hoping they would want to go, but they didn't like the environment, so they didn't go. Her grandmother is a licensed social worker and taught sex education at the Baltimore schools. Her grandmother also had a Jamaican heritage. She was born in Boston, but her grandmother left her immigrant family when she was 13 years old. Her grandmother also was able to travel to India through a fellowship program that Howard Thurman and his wife Sue did for African American students. So she was able to study through a fellowship program in India, which I thought was good. Howard Thurman, of course, was also a theologian, a professor, and a civil rights activist who worked with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that's when Howard Thurman also met Mahatma Gandhi when they went to India. Her grandmother and her auntie Sandra was present in 1963 during Dr. King's historic "I Have a Dream" speech, which I thought was cool. When her grandmother's name is Mariam, or Mariam came back from India, that's when Gilbert, who was Mariam's college boyfriend, asked her to marry him. So they got married. One thing that Jada Pinkett Smith put in this chapter, she said one time her grandfather would come home and have his eyes closed, and she would say, "Grandfather, are you sleeping?" And he'll say, "No, I'm just resting my eyes." And it reminded me of something one of my aunties said. I can't remember which. My aunt Lizanne said it. I can't remember what we was talking about, but she said something that stuck me. She said, "All shut eyes ain't sleep." That's what that reminded me of. All shut eyes ain't sleep. And her grandfather was saying, "No, I'm just resting my eyes." And she was thinking, poor grandfather, poor Gilbert. He probably was thinking, didn't we just get rid of all of our grown kids? Why we got this little one up in here in this house? You know. But Jada Pinkett Smith seemed to be like a great child, except she would sneak out in the middle of the night to go see her boyfriend. Her grandmother had a garden. Her grandma grew fruit, strawberries, vegetables, and flowers. And her grandmother got into pottery. Angel Pie, which is who grandmother called Jada Pinkett Smith. Angel Pie, her favorite part of the garden was the strawberry patch, because that's where the rabbits and the bunnies like to be. And Angel Pie, which is Jada Pinkett Smith, would want to touch the little bunnies because they were so cute, but her grandmother would tell her, "Don't touch the baby rabbits, because if you do, the mother won't come back and feed them." And Jada is a Virgo. She's a Virgo. My first two kings' father is a Virgo. I was married to a Virgo. Her grandmother, kept a meticulously clean home. She wanted her house clean. And she said she remembered literally cleaning from top to bottom. And she said her grandmother would put on a pair of white gloves and wipe her fingers across the floorboards. And if they wasn't clean, she would have to do the same thing all over again. And so Jada says that to this day she fear white gloves, because she remembered the white gloves her grandma used to. And reading this book helps explain the reason why Jada is who she is. I've always been a fan of Will and Jada Smith. Even after he made his mistake at the Oscars, none of us are perfect. But, there's no excuse for violence whatsoever, though. But in the book, she was saying there was no spanking allowed at grandmother's house, because she said that spanking was a form a slave spanking is what happened to the slaves when they didn't do what they were supposed to do. So she didn't want children to relive the horrors of slavery. And she didn't allow tickling in her house because she said prisoners were, what did she say in the book? Prisoners of war was tickled as a form of torture in prisons. So she didn't like that. And they were not allowed to play hide and seek. And the reason why, because her grandmother said that when she played hide and seek one time when she was little, it horrified her. So that wasn't allowed. Now she said although her grandmother was good at cleaning, she was a horrible cook. Now Jada described something in here that I didn't understand. Her grandma would want to make a braised cow tongue with sour cream made in a crock-pot. That doesn't sound enticing to me at all. And they had a black poodle called Pedro, but Pedro wasn't allowed in the kitchen. She wished that Pedro was, because she wanted to give Pedro her food, but she knew if she didn't eat her food, it'll still be ready for her to be eaten the next day. Her grandmother never threw away any food. Even the scraps of food that they had left, her grandmother used it in the garden to fertilize the dirt. And she said the worms would come to eat the compost, and that would help fertilize the dirt for the vegetables. But one day she ended up telling her grandma, "Ooh, this is nasty." Her grandma said, "Don't say that. Say it is unpleasant or distasteful." And then her grandmother told her food is not meant to be enjoyed. It should be eaten for nourishment. That sounds like something that someone would say that couldn't cook. But her grandmama was a socialite and a civil rights activist in her community. And at Forest Park Senior High School, they had a library named after her. And at her Falstaff School, they had a garden named after her. Her grandmother loved traveling. She went to Kenya, Ecuador, and Russia. And her grandmother would bring Jada back dolls from South Africa, South America, and necklaces from Africa. And Jada said she have some of them things with her still to this day as keepsakes, which I think is good. Her grandmother kept her active, kept in tap dancing, piano lessons, tennis, gymnastics. She made her read. Even though she would be out of school for summer break, she was not out of she was always being educated. Even if the school wasn't educating her, her grandmother made her still participate in educational activities. She had to read Alice in Wonderland, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, The Learning Tree, and Gulliver's Travels. Her grandmama told her there was no such thing as taking a break from education. And her grandmother even started learning pottery and started teaching Jada on pottery. One time she was in a gymnastics class and Jada did something wrong, and the teacher made Jada take off her pink tutu, put on a black tutu, and put her in the corner. When Jada came home and told her mom and grandmom about it, they disagreed on what to do, but her mom's name is Adrian, went up to the school and, put her foot down for humiliating Jada. And that was the end of her ballet class at that school. But she said that her grandmother would always say, "Angel Pie, you are special." And she said the way that she told her that she was special made her really believe it. And I thought that was beautiful. I think that that's what most kids just need. They just need to be told that they are special so much until they believe it. And once they believe it, then they will become that which they already are, but did not know. Yeah. So, and then one time she went to the store with her grandmother. She wanted some Nesquik to put in her milk. And then her grandmother said, "No, we're protesting Nestle because Nestle was trying to sell baby formula to the mothers in Africa to discourage them from breastfeeding. And by doing this, a lot of the babies in Africa were dying because they didn't have any clean water to mixed the formula with, and they was doing this and killing their children. I said I was gonna look that up before I started this video, but I forgot to. But if that's something that Nelson did, then I need to be boycotting them too, unless Nelson made it right by making clean water for the same people they harmed over there. But Jada said this was one of her first lessons in activism. But she said that her grandmother instilled in her that a child's mind should be fed with hope. Her grandmother, even though she went through the civil rights movement, never really talked about the horrific stories behind it. Her grandmother was more so focused on what can we do now to make our lives better. But in January of 1997, her grandmother made an exception because she wanted Jada to see The Roots that was coming out on TV by Alex Haley. And during that process, Jada was, of course, horrified about the African American history. She said it was painful to watch. Now, her grandmother calls herself an atheist, but even though she called herself an atheist, she didn't restrict Jada from learning about different religions and philosophies. But her grandmother did not believe in organized religion. But she did believe that we all should have a guiding principle, which is love. Then she talks about her grandfather. He had a yellow Volvo, and they would go to these meetings on Sundays when most black families would be in church. They would be going to the Ethical Society meetings, and that's when they would learn about Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and all types of faith and mysterious communion. But her core belief is God is love, which is what I believe, and that our higher power is available according to each individual's soul's needs, which I believe too. Jada didn't grow up in a very huggy, touchy family. Her grandfather, Gilbert, was a Jewish man from Portugal. And Gilbert, who's her grandfather, his family was from Barbados, and his family, Gilbert's parents grew up on Ellis Island. Now, Jada's mother's mother, which would be Jada's great-grandmother, had paranoid schizophrenia and was institutionalized in Boston. And so her grandmother mother wasn't able to really raise and care for him. Now, her grandmother got pregnant when she was 13, but her grandmother didn't even know what sex was. She didn't know if she was raped. She didn't know what was going on. Her mother was already institutionalized, and when her grandmother got pregnant at the age of 13, her father wanted nothing more to do with her. And I think this is why her grandmother was so interested in teaching sex education in the schools, because her grandmother got pregnant at the age of 13, not even knowing what was going on, what was happening to her. And ignorance is the biggest culprit of teen pregnancy. And so she became a sex educator in the school system. But anyway, her grandmother ended up giving birth to a baby boy, which she put up for adoption. And then she was put in a foster care system and raised by a white family, where she was fending, where she was taught how to clean houses. And that's probably why her grandmother is so strict and meticulous on keeping a clean house. But the horror that her grandmother went through had to give her a feeling of unworthiness as a little child. But her grandma was able to live through her pain and her losses and discover her own self-love and love for her own family. Her grandmother's home became a sanctuary for her children and her children's children. Her grandmother has a long-lasting legacy of love. Now, even though her grandmother didn't always agree with the choices her children made, she always gave her home, made sure her home was a sanctuary for her children to come back to. And over the years, her grandmother had her children come back and live with her at several times for different reasons. And her grandmother loved them all fearlessly. And one thing she said her grandma would do at night, which I thought was beautiful, and she said she could not, Jada said she could not even sleep without her grandmother doing it, but her grandmother would play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata every night before she went to bed. Okay, so I'm going to end chapter 1 with reading a piece from Jada Pinkett Smith that she put in a journal about her grandmother's garden. It's titled, I Am My Grandmother's Garden by Jada Pinkett Smith. We all have traumas in our childhood that can make us overlook the beauty that surrounds us. Oftentimes we believe we have to focus more on the negative events because they created so much pain. Some of us believe holding on to the negative is what protects us from not experiencing that pain again. That couldn't be farther from the truth. Unfortunately, we tend to relive aspects of the negative experiences because we stay stuck. By consciously or unconsciously holding on to the negative thoughts our painful experiences birthed. Don't forget the beauty that surrounded you, that fed you and nourished your energy in a way that helped you get here, to where you are today. Take time to remember the joy that existed so that we can reconnect our inner child to those pleasant moments that fed us the hope we needed, that gave us the strength to make it to this moment. You are so much more than your trauma. What I find helpful is exploring my memories and feelings with pen and paper. If you find some quiet time today, take an opportunity to write 3 beautiful memories from your childhood, or simply from your past that help you to nourish the beautiful you that you are. By the way, you are a golden soul. Jada Pinkett Smith. So this was chapters 1, My Grandmother's Garden. My Grandmother's Garden by Jada Pinkett Smith in the book Worthy by Jada Pinkett Smith. Like I said, it's a good book. Thank you so much for liking. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for turning on that notification bell. I love you. I appreciate you. I thank God for you. All is well. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And may my whole life prove that God is good.